everyone, it is election day and it's time for episode 440. Man, we're almost at 450 already and it seems like 400 wasn't that long ago.
Wow.
Mariana Parente, thank you.
Are we thinking about 500? Like, I think 500 should be a pretty big...
I'm putting Lucas on that and he's going to come up. I think see to Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He seems...
I'm down.
Yeah,
Let's
so
go.
Start planning it.
Yeah.
You also are going to need to fundraise it. So,
You better start on that
so
too.
you've got 60 episodes, 60. You've got about a year to
Got
figure
about
that
a
out.
year.
Yeah.
But I figure in that amount of time, he knows how to get all the good flights, what days to order the flights. He knows he must have someplace we can all. I mean, I'm willing to tent it if it means we're going to Brazil.
No, we're going to Sao Paulo, my house.
All right, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's make this happen.
That's much better than a
500
tent.
from Brazil. I like
Yeah,
the
so
sound
if
of
we were
that.
going in tent, I was going to be sick that day.
Yeah. It's like Randy can speak for himself on this one.
Well, I just spent the week in the rain in the tent, a weekend in the rain in a tent. So I guess that's probably my optimism there that
There you go.
it wasn't that great. But anyway.
What were you doing in a tent over the weekend?
It was the Down Syndrome Foundation of Florida. Every year they go over to Cape Canaveral and you get a epic DJ for about 4.5 hours on Saturday afternoon. Come on, you guys are on vacation. Let me hear you. And you're like, nah, that's not us, but we can hear you. But anyway, it was who does the Mardi Gras? That was who was in port yesterday or Saturday was the Mardi Gras.
That sounds like Carnival.
Carnival, yes. And then there was the logo with the T with the crown on top, but I don't know who that is. But they were leaving on Sunday, so the upper deck.
The T with the crown on top.
Yeah, or a J maybe. Looks
So
like
it's not
T.
Royal Caribbean.
I don't know. Didn't look like it. Maybe it was. I don't know. I don't know anything about cruise ships. So unless it's Disney where you see Mickey's ears on the side and the Mardi Gras was painted up front right where we could see it. So otherwise I don't know anything about cruises. Never been.
We need to take you.
Anticipate maybe someday.
I've been on 2.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're into a party under the sun and like 150-foot giant jumbotrons on the top deck and a DJ. I mean, I know that part because I'm 2 years in a row now. At least they didn't start till after 12. Last year it was like 9:30 in the morning when they were doing check, mic check, and you're like, what the heck?
They're trying to get everybody off the boat. Probably it's not time to go home.
And then it was just a dance party until they left at 5:30. Yeah, and you're literally like 100, maybe 100 yards from the boat, and it's like, wow, it is loud. Like you can watch your tent go.
Maybe you should think about swimming out there and just being a stowaway or something.
Well, they were loading a lot of cargo on that ship. Is all I'm saying, all morning long. So you could probably sneak in there somewhere. Anyway, so yeah, that was
just to be clear, we're not advocating illegal things.
No.
Just to be clear. Just to be clear.
No, certainly that would be inappropriate. But a champion is someone who gets up when they can't. So if you get caught, just get back up. Is that a
Good transition?
I don't know.
But he also said the best defense is a good offense.
Yeah.
See?
There we are.
Yeah, so I think those work in there somehow. I'll let you decide what's appropriate for your stowaway possibilities. So this week we were back in Daniel, according to Ken, who is sitting across from me, and Melanie, who is sitting to you're like 11 o'clock.
Diagonal-ish.
Diagonal-ish. And then you're 9 o'clock, Lucas.
Yep.
So,
Sitting on your left hand.
on the left hand. I mean, Ken's still
You're not
my
in
right.
the most favored spot, Lucas.
No, because
Yeah,
technically I should be seeing this one. That way Ken's always on the right. That's
Lucas is your left-hand man.
That's it. And right, in truth. But we won't,
Which
anyway.
in my world is a compliment, Lucas.
I appreciate it.
The left-hand man.
Yeah.
The left-hand man. So we are in, this is week 3 already. How do we get there so fast? Of Dominion, a series on Daniel. And the fire, of course, the fiery furnace. The fire. The Daniel not being there might be my biggest question.
Yeah.
From the week. I was like, I had never. I mean, you read the story and you go, oh, yeah, Daniel wasn't there. You realize that, but was Daniel dead?
No.
Too early for that? I don't know the timeline in this, so I'm just purely asking for those of us who don't know the timeline.
It would since he
hasn't
shows
stopped
up
smiling
in
since I
chapter
asked.
5 and 6, we tend to believe he was still alive and kicking.
Sabbatical?
Sabbatical, probably a John Monday
I was just going to say.
sabbatical. Yeah,
Maybe
He
his sabbatical was
did
what-
it John Monday and disappeared for a couple months and
He was sick that day.
left his friends to.
And they were like, dude, while you were gone, you cannot believe what happened.
Yes.
You cannot believe. In your stupid dream interpretation, he built one. He built one.
It really is one of the oddities of the story, though, that Daniel doesn't show up in that particular story, and I think it's an interesting thing. It kind of, in some ways, makes sense that if Daniel was the one that explained Nebuchadnezzar's dream to him, that maybe Nebuchadnezzar doesn't want him around when he revamps what the dream is all about. So, I mean, that could be.
So Babylon is that in modern day Iraq?
Yeah.
Right? Right. Am I right on that? So, I'm surprised at this time no one has dug up yet.
A 90-foot gold statue.
Right. Like, I would think this is like the treasure hunter's dream is like maybe it just fell over and the wind.
Well, I'm guessing when the Mongols went through, they probably melted down
probably.
everything that had value there. So I'm sure that, or the Medes or the Persians, or anyway, or maybe even Nebuchadnezzar.
Melanie thinks that it's still there, I can tell.
Oh, I'm just glad they didn't get a hold of the pyramids. That would have been
The Mongols?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think? What's harder to take apart, a pyramid or a 90-foot gold statue? It's pretty close to the same thing.
Probably. They probably had enough people they could have carried the statue. Just, you get enough guys underneath of there. I think you can pull it off. Pretty sure. I mean, if you can.
I see what you did there. Pull it off.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, see, it is. We were all up really early this morning, I think is really what it was. Because Randy saves voting for the day of. And
Is it like a special tradition for you?
well, and
Like
I live.
voting on the day of?
Oh, yeah. There's a reason we have problems in our elections, and mail in ballots is the biggest one. So I would never do such a thing.
Oh, Randy.
Ballot stuffing.
Sowing distrust in our
I know.
system.
I'm just saying. There's a reason like most countries in the world that are civilized don't do it, but we do. That's all I'm saying. So I won't do that. I won't do that.
All right, all you uncivilized mail-in voter people.
That's right. Here's looking at you guys. No, I just think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea. So I don't.
Well, it's an interesting thing, though, Randy. Somehow the military, I know my daughter who's on Guam is pretty appreciative that she's able to do a mail-in ballot. So
military gets a special, and if you're truly abroad, but like.
So the military would never cheat. But anyway, I guess we need to go ahead and I guess we need to not go down this road too far, huh?
I'm just
it's
saying
not
that-
Daniel 3. What was Daniel 3 about again?
I think. Well, there was a king up front again this week, and I didn't call you out personally last week, and Razan, and I should have, because I enjoyed last week's.
Razan is so good,
just as much as this week's. I mean,
Ken Bradley
and we did call him out, so I really felt bad that I forgot. But Razan, you've killed it for the last 2 weeks, being the Neb, and he was.
He's got one more week to go.
He's a good Neb.
Yeah, and he's gonna have to. The character's gonna alter slightly this week after a very difficult experience.
No shades, no. If he trims
see.
the beard, I'm going to be upset.
I don't think there's any.
Okay, facial hair must stay.
possibility.
'Cause-
In this case, he would actually need it to be.
Yeah, that's right.
There would need to be
probably
more facial hair.
Yeah, no, that would be just a travesty of injustice in this world. That's all I'm saying. So the other part that I thought was, and I've always thought about this of like Neb and his crew looking into the fiery furnace and being like, 1, 2, 3. Like, were we day drinking that day that they were like, did we have one too many? Have we just not? Are like, do we need to go to the optician? Like, do we need to get a what is the deal? There's 4.
4.
How like I just feel like he had absolute dread. Because it feels like he would be like with like being a not monotheistic,
Polytheistic,
and believing in worshiping all these different gods like somebody showed up. Like I'm thinking the worst scenario Hollywood movie comes to life, and Neb's like, "Wow, we really messed up this time." And I'm wondering, and people we'll get to the comments because people had some ideas, but thinking about, is that like, was it fear that changed his mind? What do you think that was part of it, where it's just like, man, we threw in 3, we now have 4, but 4 don't come out. Only 3.
Only 3.
So that to me seems, I mean, I guess if I had a scenario that I was really scared about, I think that would be me. I think I'd be like, okay, I don't know. Daniel's God interpreted the dream. Did he put together that was, well, he probably did, because it was the other 3.
Yeah, that's an interesting, I'd never really thought about Nebuchadnezzar being scared or fearful, but that's an interesting possibility.
Yeah.
I always took it that he was more in awe. It was just like he was kind of, because there are no aggressive moves by the 4 in the fire. I think any one of us would be kind of in awe if you saw 3 people go into a fire. Number one, that they don't get immediately consumed.
Well, of course, there is that part.
That they're walking around, and then a 4th person shows up. Yeah, I think you'd be pretty curious.
Is it grotesque to wonder how long it would take for someone in a fire that hot to actually just melt? I mean,
well, the guards immediately died that were trying to throw them in.
Yeah.
So I don't know about the melting part, but at 5,000 degrees or whatever, it would be pretty quick, I would think.
Yeah.
Not that I'm an expert on this by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, you're not?
No.
I thought there must be a Bible commentary that
That's Melanie's line.
Melanie, is there
fire is my specialty.
Yeah? No guesses? Okay. All right, that's fine.
Yeah, it was interesting when I was doing the research on the fire. They basically the technology of their time only allowed it to get to a certain heat, and so when it says, I can't what anyway.
How'd they get it 7 times hotter?
He said 7 times hotter. Most people reading that think that's pretty much hyperbole. He was just saying make it as hot as you possibly can, and I think that I read, and again, I don't have this in my notes in front of me, but I do believe that I read in the IVP Bible background commentary there where it said that the technology of the day would only have allowed it to get up to about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which when I say only, that's...
I was just going to say only. Yeah.
You know, I don't know. What's the heat of the surface of the sun? Do we know that? I don't know.
I don't know, but that's...
Point is, I think it would have been quick, and it did kill the guards that were throwing them in.
And they didn't even go inside. Man.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Well, I mean, if you've ever been near a really big bonfire, you know you don't have to get into the bonfire to start feeling pretty hot.
Or to be missing your eyebrows. Don't ask me how I know.
Now I kind of want to know.
I kind of want to know, yeah. But in the other part that I think, and I don't know if we're going to get into this. This was my other question was, are we going to do more of, because like last year we got into Revelation and then we kind of leaked that, hey, we're going to be getting into Daniel next year. And, there's a little bit of, symbiotic relationship that happens there, which I thought was really cool. How you pointed out in chapter 3 and then Revelation 7. Is there more of that in this series or no?
More revelation in this series?
Yeah, more of those kinds of, or is it just only because the story goes where the story goes?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, because I found that extremely interesting. That, I mean, I know there's those pieces, but when you see them working together, it really makes. Too often we complain because we don't have answers, or we don't see things wrapped up in a tiny bow. And not that this is like an answer to some great question of what we haven't known for years. It's like, oh, all we have to do is look in Revelation, but it does just go, oh, that goes really nicely. And you can kind of maybe not pull the bow tight because it doesn't answer everything, but that looks really nice. That's satisfying. It's gratifying to know that there's something else that refers to it, and then puts a little extra confidence in it. At least for me personally, anywhere. And then I'm thinking, I kind of felt like once we got to the idols, everyone just was like, idols everywhere. It's not a 90-foot statue that we can melt down. Although, that's good work if you can get it. And if it's still there, maybe we should go looking and
treasure hunt with Randy. Sorry, we're not going to Brazil anymore for the 5.
We're going to Iraq. We're going to look for this because there's a lot of projects you can accomplish with a 90-foot statue of the Nebs. Is all I'm saying. So it could be worth our time. I don't know.
One of the things I didn't talk about in the sermon, but is an interesting. A question that people look at when they see the dimensions of the statues. We talked about it being 90 feet tall, but do you remember how wide it was?
Did you say?
I didn't say.
I didn't think so. I was like, wait a minute, was this a quiz from the?
That was going to take me down a rabbit hole. But it was only 4 feet wide. So when you start doing the
what 4 feet wide,
right? So when you start doing the I don't know what you call it, not the physics, but the architecture.
How does that even stand?
There you go. And that's one of the questions that people have is that if it was 90 feet tall but only 4 feet wide, how does that work? It seems like it should be, I think they said it should have been more like 12 to 16 feet wide to support and do all that. So there's one theory that there was a pedestal that this was on, and so it wasn't from the base all the way to the so it wasn't the toes. It was so it may have been a little bit. The statue itself may have been smaller,
sitting on top. Ooh, but that base would have been meaty and chunky then.
Yeah,
a lot of gold in there.
Yeah, well, if the base was gold, I mean, it would depending.
That's wild. And that's wild to think of it like any other way. Now, like, okay, there has to be a base.
And this is also one of the places where. People who don't believe that when they'll say that the book of Daniel is more metaphorical, that it's not actual, it didn't actually happen. This is one of the things that they'll say, like, here's another example. The dimensions don't make sense.
But it doesn't describe it as from the toes to the top of the crown or top of the head that it was 90 feet, only that it was 90 feet.
It's a little vague.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That's see, now your entire thought process about when you used to think about the stories now has changed, because now I'm going to forever picture this little needle with the head on top of it as the statue.
And that's, by the way, one of the reasons I like using modern translations of the Bible, because I think sometimes we miss some of the details in the older versions where you're where you're reading it in cubits and so forth, and you don't really. Oh, yeah. But when you actually say, "Oh, wait a minute, that's."
Because what's it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was wrong about the 4. It was 9 feet wide.
Okay.
Yeah, but still, that basically 90 by 9 is still, and I can't remember what they said the dimensions should have been, but it should have been a fair amount larger than that, basically, to support itself. So, anyway, the point, that was one of the interesting things I was reading again in my research, is that the people kind of go back and forth on how the dimensions worked on it.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting, though, that it's things that you, like you said, you haven't maybe considered exactly as it was, or at least as it was described, to even know the fact that, well, maybe that doesn't really make physical or engineering sense. Maybe there was some other way that this might have looked to make it happen. That's pretty cool. The story you talked about, this is one of those stories that ends great, and then it feels good, like, man, God came and saved the day. And then you look at, and this was some questions and comments we'll get to about and you mentioned John the Baptist, where it's like he spent his whole life just seemingly doing everything nearly as right as possible, only to find the end alone in a dungeon for probably a fair amount of time before having his head cut off.
Yeah.
And those are hard to reconcile when you feel like you resonate more with John the Baptist, and maybe you haven't gotten the fireproof version for a while.
And then you think about the 12 disciples. Out of the 12, according to church history, only one of the 12 didn't die, wasn't executed or killed in some martyred in some way. That was John the Beloved, and who actually survived and died a natural death, but the other 11 all were martyred. I think that's worth thinking about, that only 1 in 12 really made it through without that. And even John is, exiled on Patmos. He's, according to church legend, he was thrown into a boiling pot of oil at some point.
Wow.
So there's a lot of, a fair amount of suffering that Christ followers do, or that happens to them. And I think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego tend to be more of the exception than the rule. And I think that unfortunately in Christianity, we kind of tend to make them the rule as opposed to the exception. And I think that sometimes can be really painful for people because they're like, where's that fourth person in the fire for me? Where's, I'm in the fire. Why am I? I feel like I'm being consumed by this. And so when we have a Christianity that teaches that the rule is that Jesus shows up in the fire and you don't have to suffer here on earth and that everything's okay. When we say that that's the way it is, as opposed to that's usually the exception, then people get pretty stunned when life doesn't turn out the way that they want it to, and they pray and sincerely ask Christ to be there and to save them from whatever they're going through. And it doesn't happen the way that they prayed for it to happen. And so I think that's why one of the reasons why I really wanted to just mention John the Baptist. And you can think about a number of other people in the Bible as well. You think about another one that comes to my mind is Elisha. You have Elijah, who's who he apprentices under, and Elijah gets to go to heaven in a fiery chariot, right? Elisha dies a debilitating disease at the end of his life. We find in him in bed, and the Bible has this king coming in to his death room asking for some favors, but Elisha's not going easy. He doesn't die in his sleep. He's sick. The Bible says when he was in his final sickness, and when you look at Elisha, you could make the argument that Elisha actually has more faith than Elijah did, that he's more faithful, that the miracles he performs actually, Jesus seems to mirror many of those. And so, again, I think it's just worth thinking about that.
The more special you are, the worse it is. I mean,
it could be, yeah.
It kind of seems like that sometimes.
Yeah.
That's a little scary.
So then I guess John the Beloved maybe was the least of the disciples then or something. I don't know.
I think maybe he bought a little much of that as of his own press there. Maybe he was just a little thinking too much. The other part that you said, what is you finished with 3 questions. What does worshiping God look like in your life? And I was like, I thought about it as, how does your life or your current life influencing your worshiping of God? Because I feel like probably asking the question pretty similarly, but it made me stop to think about times when you feel like your relationship with God is really good, and you've had one of those number 4s in your corner, and you feel pretty good about, man, this is working out great. This is good. And then you go through the opposite for a while, and then go, does my worship change, or what I think or how I really feel about God? Or my prayers less, I want to say genuine maybe, but they just don't feel the same. They don't feel the same closeness, because it's hard to talk to someone when you feel like they're ignoring you, and it's hard to feel genuine, and it's dumb to think transparent, because he already knows that part is always like, you just because you don't say it doesn't mean he doesn't know it. And, that always plays with my mind a little bit. But I thought that, what are you willing to stand up for? And I think those two are so closely, because what I'm willing to stand up for, I think also is a lot of times, unfortunately, how my worshiping looks. If my worshiping isn't feeling all that good, and it's the connection isn't as strong as it should be for whatever reason, whether it's you're not seeing the fourth, or you're in that down, it doesn't feel as good, and I feel like it affects what you're willing to stand up for, even if it's small things. It doesn't have to be something ginormous, but just something you normally should say, oh wow, that really shouldn't happen. I should really just speak into that, or just like, hey, don't that's not appropriate, or it could be a bunch of different things. But so those two have been stuck in my mind. I did catch the very end of the message while we were gone. I was walking through the rain with a towel over my head, watching the end of I think it was first service, when you asked the questions. And I was like, well, that's going to be sticking with me for the rest of the weekend thinking about it. And it really has, because I feel like that's just a part where, man, I hate missing good opportunities to, when you pray for the Holy Spirit to put you in places or put people in your path, things like that. And then you're like, yeah, I'm not really feeling that today. Holy Spirit, we're going to have to push that one off for another time. And then afterwards, it's like, oh, why did I do that? I don't like it when I do that, and I hate missing those opportunities, but I also don't feel in the moment that you have the bandwidth sometimes to do it. Like, if I'm not going to do it well, should I attempt it when I'm already, like, not in a good headspace? Because it could probably be worse if I just if I didn't open my mouth and screw it up. I don't know. That was where those thoughts left me all weekend, thinking how to be better.
Well, I love that you were thinking about it.
Yeah. Well,
makes you happy when you ask questions and people don't just go home and forget about it. So cool. Yeah. I got one.
I was gonna say, you at least had one this weekend. And then I wanted to start with, because at the end of second, Tito kind of teased this one, and then you're like, well, that's not a 1 minute answer. And this was a question, and I believe it came from Anonymous. I didn't write it down. I went back to look for it. But the book of Daniel also reads that God gives and takes throwaways. How do we accept a political outcome when we don't align ourselves with them? Oh, thrones away, sorry. The book of Daniel reads that God gives and takes thrones away, kingdoms, power. How do we accept a political outcome when we don't align ourselves with them? Because that's probably the one, if everyone, this is Tuesday, you guys will be listening to this on Wednesday. Not that we'll probably, I don't know if we'll have results by Wednesday. I kind of feel like no, but I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, it's hard to know. This is one that's... it's pretty close. So whatever happens, it seems like there's going to be a pretty large percentage of the U.S. population that's going to be unhappy with the result. So it's a good question that Melanie ought to go ahead and give Melanie a chance to. I think I already threw down on this a little bit and I'm happy to talk more later. But what do you think, Melanie?
You don't want me to answer this, Ken?
Of course I do.
Oh yeah. You missed 2 weeks ago, and you were like, I was armed and ready.
Oh yeah, I had all the things to say. No, I think it depends on our picture of God and our picture of what our expectation of how God is supposed to act. And when we think about, the book of Daniel, I think one of the important things to remember is that Daniel was written for a particular time and a particular people. And the people of Israel, the people of Judah, were conquered and they were spread out all over the place. It's called the diaspora. They spread everybody out. And one of the really difficult things when you are a people with a particular identity and then all of a sudden you're spread out over a large area, you don't have that central identity anymore. So it was really important for people to be able to remember who they were, who their God was, and what made them special. So when it comes to the book of Daniel, I think that we can zero in and look at the details of, how hot the fire was or how tall the statue was. But I think the most important thing was the reason that these stories were being told. And the reason these stories were being told was to inspire confidence in the people that had been spread out all over the place and were trying to figure out, wait a minute, is God still here? Do I still have an identity? Why is all this happening? Why does it look like these people over here are in charge when we're supposed to be worshiping a bigger God? So all of these different stories that were put together into the book of Daniel were stories that reinforced that idea. Like these were champion tales of Daniel standing up to the king and then God coming through, or when it talked about that Judah was conquered, but God let this happen. So I think that there can be a certain amount of reverse engineering. And I think that there can also be times when people are trying to make sense of their lives, and so they tell stories to make sense of their lives. And I think that this case in Daniel are examples of this. And so it doesn't surprise me to hear someone writing the book of Daniel saying, God sets them up, God takes them down,
yeah.
Don't worry. And I think that's the main point of why the book of Daniel was written. It was to tell people, God is in control of this, so relax, and it's all going to come together, and then you're going to be restored, because people need hope.
So, speaking of all these different stories, is the author of Daniel the same for all of these stories, or what? And who? I don't know. Did you cover this? Who wrote it?
You've hit on a big debate. It's so within the Seventh-day Adventist denomination, we take the stance that it was written by Daniel at some point during his lifetime. Although there's some interesting questions about that, because we're hearing some things near the end of his lifetime too. But the official position of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is that it was written by Daniel during his lifetime, handed down, so on and so forth. Within scholarly circles, there tends to be consensus that Daniel didn't write it, that it was written by multiple people many years after. And again, this is even within those circles, they debate each other. And as we're going to talk about when we talk about chapter 5 in 2 weeks, for a long time, people said, well, there's no way this was actually a historically accurate book, because if Daniel had been there, he would have known that the person that he says is the king of Babylon when it's overthrown was not the king of Babylon. There was a different person who was king historically. We know that, and so we'll get into one of the things that gives me faith in that this book was something that was handed down through time. I do think that there were people who came in and maybe added some things, but I do believe personally that Daniel did write a lot of the stories that came down in this book, and that it's his prophecies that you see at the end of the book, or the prophecies that were given to him, I should say. Good people will argue on this, and very smart people will take some different positions on this. I'd say the majority of scholarship believes that this book was probably written, and Melanie, you may have this better than I do, about 500 years before Christ. Is that
I think
general consensus? Or
no, I think that there are pieces that were written over time. So I think a lot of scholars believe that some of the stories were written maybe a couple hundred years after Daniel. Some of them think that maybe it was actually put together during the time of the Maccabees, around 165 BCE. So the idea, I think, that a lot of scholars have is that the person Daniel himself didn't actually exist, that there are lots of stories of lots of different people, and Daniel kind of emerged as a legend figure. And so you have different people in different places, which could be why it's partially written in Hebrew and partially written in Aramaic, because it doesn't make sense for one author to suddenly decide, oh, I came back from lunch and I'm kind of feeling like Aramaic right now.
I know I do, but I mean, I'm different, so that goes without saying.
So I think that most scholars think that these were court tales. These were tales that were a lot of, which would be why Daniel doesn't appear in the story of the fiery furnace.
Okay.
Because his friends are there, but he's not there. It's because it's a different story. It's a different tale. I think ultimately all the stories end up coming together around this figure, Daniel. And so part of it could have been written earlier, part of it could have been written later, and actually it was probably written after the book of Esther, but the book of Esther chronologically comes before the book of Daniel. So, but I think when it comes to faith, I think it's really important for some people to say, well, no, wait a minute. Daniel wrote this. It's in the Bible. It seems pretty clear that this is from Daniel's perspective. He has all these dreams and visions. And so that's what inspires faith. I think for other people who maybe zoom out on the story and look at it as maybe disparate pieces that got put together over time into this story of the book of Daniel, the faith is in the God of the story, not so much in the details of the story. So I think there's more than one way to look at it, and I do think there's a lot of debate, and
I think it's important that people be aware of that debate, because I think that sometimes within our Seventh-day Adventist communities, we don't share the other side of the debate, and so when somebody, there may be a few of you listening to this podcast that your minds are just completely blown right now. This is the first time you've ever heard that. And for us, it's important for you to be aware of that, so that when you're not surprised when that comes up in a conversation with a friend of yours who is knowledgeable about the Bible but views the Bible in a different way, because it can be really, it can be very difficult when you hear something like this and you see some of the scholarship behind it, and you go, wait a minute, well, what's going on here? Again, I've said it more than a few times. Good people can take different positions on things. I tend to be more of a biblical literalist. I do think there was a real Daniel. I do think that this book was written. It doesn't bother me the idea that maybe some people came along and did some editing and did some moving around of things. But I happen to believe that there was a real Daniel, and for me, it's part of the faith that I have. I see things in the book of Daniel that make me feel like, and we'll talk about that more later, but that make me feel like the person who wrote this had to have been there, had to have had some idea about what was going on, because by the time of the Maccabees, some of the ideas and things had shifted in their way. And again, scholars will argue this back and forth, and that's, to me, for some people, it's very frustrating and it's debilitating to their faith. For me, it's fun and it builds my faith up. It's one of those things where I think, well, it's interesting to see these different perspectives and to hear different ideas about it. And at the end of the day, what I would say is, to Melanie's point, it really is, whether I'm right or somebody else is right, it really is about the God of the Bible. That's really what it's about. It's about having faith that there is a God in heaven who cares about what's happening here on earth and that is controlling the course of human history. And again, there are people who disagree with that. There are Thomas Jefferson, very famous deist, that thought, God just kind of wound the earth up, walked away, and left it there to kind of go on its own course. And there are people who believe that. And for me, personally, that's not particularly satisfying, to have a God that's not invested. And it's certainly not what I read in the pages of the Bible. But then again, Jefferson didn't think the Bible was particularly credible, and he went through and cut out the parts he did. I think he got down to about 3 pages or so. I don't know if it was actually that little, but I mean, the point is, we all should be on a faith journey asking ourselves what truth is, and being honest about things and being open to the fact that I can see things different and you can see things different than I do, and we can still have a nice conversation and walk away. Maybe something has grown in us, or we've changed a little bit, or maybe nothing has. Maybe we go, okay, that's I hear your point, but I'm not. Yeah, I'm just not there. For me, my faith tells me this is where I am and this is what I believe, and so I'm sticking here.
But I think it's so important, though, to have that knowledge, because there's nothing worse than being in a conversation you feel pretty confident about, like at least enough to be in the conversation, and then it's like,
wait a minute.
Like I had no clue. Like you just laid an egg right there, and hearing it from Melanie. Well, I trust Melanie, one, because I know that.
Oh, thank you, Randy.
That she would.
That's one out of 3 people.
Bad.
No,
those are good odds. Okay,
but I mean, to have expertise and knowledge and study and a heart for God that is inquisitive and may take you in different places than it takes other people. To me, that's a gift, because you're going places that other people like you said, it may not just be not like it's not satisfying for me. It's like, oh, whoa, you're messing with my entire view of the world, of God, of everything. I'm not comfortable with that. But then to know that, I also know that, Ken has studied, Ken knows, is a smart person, and is seeing those two come across as different, where the difference is and where some of them meld together. To me, that makes it more enjoyable, because you kind of the tapestry is all the richer for the story, to me, for history, for the Bible, for faith, for all of it. To be able to say, I'm still confident because of what you said, Melanie. It's the faith of the God of the Bible, not just of the story, or whether or not an argument over who wrote it for sure. I mean, in the end, does it matter if the lessons we're learning are about the same God? And for some, I don't want to diminish that, but also I really enjoy it, and I appreciate the fact that we try to be very clear and open when we have the information to share that we do, so that we're at least aware of it. Whether we completely understand the timelines and all the rest of it, I think is not always relevant necessarily, but having the knowledge is really good. And then if it's interesting, go more for it.
Well, if you want another fun exercise, you can read the chapters that didn't make it into the book of Daniel, like the story of Susanna and the elders.
Dang, what?
And Bel and the dragon.
Ooh,
and
I like dragons.
The prayer of Azariah.
These are the apocryphal.
Yeah.
They're interesting. They actually, in this particular story, there's actually a very lengthy prayer of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that they had while they were in the fiery furnace.
What?
That didn't make the cut for the Protestant Bible.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, now I'm gonna have to edit. Hey, Randy, when you're editing this, stop.
That was just some more strings for your tapestry.
Right, and then go ahead and stop while you're editing and go look up what Ken did. Okay? Just as a reminder. Okay, and speaking of more, Melanie, in the chat, what's is it a chiasm?
Chiasm.
What? Because there was some.
Just think of it as an X. It's basically
Like
where
Twitter X.
No. Can you even say it's like Twitter X? Anyway, never mind. Okay, anyway. Just think of it as basically something that the first and the last link up, and then the second and the second to last link up, and then there's a middle. And it's kind of an inverted, and it kind of they link together.
Okay.
And is that, do you want to give the official? So
just think of it like, for example, if you have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 is going to relate to 5, 2 is going to relate to 4, and then 3 is right in the middle. And generally 3 is the piece that is the really important point that the whole thing is trying to make. So I get there are a couple of chiastic structures, more than one chiastic structure in the book of Daniel.
And I'm going to guess that I didn't see the question, but I'm going to guess, because basically in the sermon, I think second service, I maybe mentioned it more, that this is,
it came from second.
Some people can view this as a chiastic structure, because particularly the Aramaic part of this book, because you start off with the introduction, that chapter 1 that really doesn't have, that's in Hebrew, and then you jump to chapter 2, which is the dream, right, that's had, and that corresponds to chapter 6,
right? Yep.
And then chapter 2 is 5, and then chapter 3 and 4 actually are together. So what we're going to see next week is, and I haven't chosen to do this sermon series as a chiastic series where we kind of pair these chapters up, although we could have. But what you'll see is Nebuchadnezzar is in this upcoming sermon. Nebuchadnezzar is actually going to bow to God's power. And then what we see in the next chapter is what happens when somebody doesn't bow to God's power. His great-grandson doesn't bow to his power. And so you have a God who humbles one king, and the king accepts the humbling, and another king that gets humbled and doesn't accept it. And there's going to be this, basically the kingdom is given back to Nebuchadnezzar. The kingdom is going to be taken away from Belshazzar. And so there's that. And then when you look at this particular story that we did this last week with Daniel in the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, we're going to pair that with Daniel in the lion's den, where Daniel is saved by an angel from the lion's den. So anyway, so you kind of you can see that there's this structure. So this middle section that we're going to be doing this week, this coming Sabbath, and the following one really is the main point of this story that you're going to see in general. Everything is leading up to the point that God takes away kingdoms and God gives kingdoms. In Nebuchadnezzar's case, he's going to take it away for 7 years, then he's going to give it back after Nebuchadnezzar humbles himself. And in the case of the next chapter, this Belshazzar basically completely disrespects Yahweh, and Yahweh comes and says, "That's it, you're done," and takes away the kingdom, and a kingdom that Babylon was considered to be impregnable. There was no way could have been taken. It basically, and I'll get into the details in the sermon, but I think it had like enough food to survive like a 20-year siege, if that kind of gives you any idea. So wow. I mean, so basically you've got an army on the outside that has to figure out how to feed itself for 20 years. I mean, that most armies are just not going to have that kind of time, or they're not going to do that, and or the supplies to be able to figure this out. And so God miraculously allows the Medes and Persians to figure out how to take over a city that was supposed to be impregnable. And so anyway, so the main point is that we're going to see is that God can take away and give back, or he can take away permanently and put somebody else in place. And that really is the whole theme, dominion, of this book. Because even when we get into the prophecy in the last chapters of Daniel, it's again all about God basically saying, I know what's going to happen in the future. You go ahead and try to figure it out, but when it happens, you'll know I was right.
Yeah.
And that shows you that I know what's happening, and therefore, if I knew what was going to happen, just going back to chapter 2, where if you can interpret a dream that you don't know if you know what somebody else dreamed, and then you're able to interpret, you can count on the interpretation. If God can tell you what's going to happen in the future and it actually happens, then you can trust that God to be in charge of your future beyond what was predicted as well. And that's what you're really seeing in the book of Daniel.
God always has receipts. Come on, man. All right, Anonymous 2024 asked, was Nebuchadnezzar's reaction to seeing the men unharmed in the furnace just an emotional response, or was he truly committed to following God? How can we avoid letting emotions alone drive our faith in God? And I think you almost just, like what you just talked about, kind of answers that. I mean, God's telling you, not that he's giving us what's going to happen in the future, but...
Yeah. Well, I talked about it a little bit in this sermon. Firstly, whether it was an emotional response or not, I'm not inside Nebuchadnezzar's brain, so it appears to be a very emotional response. And based on what we see in the very next chapter, it wasn't a long-term commitment. Maybe his commitment was to protecting the reputation of God, but I don't think that he had really taken God on as his own. And so, but going to the emotional part, I think we want to be a little bit, as I said in Q&A afterwards, want to be a little bit careful, because social psychologist Jonathan Haidt talks about emotions, and he uses the metaphor that our logic is like the rider on an elephant, and the elephant is emotion. If our emotion, and basically the idea is, when you have the little rider on the elephant will do what the elephant wants to do. The rider can train the emotions. The rider can train the elephant and work on that. But the fact of the matter is, you're riding on a big elephant, and if that elephant gets really scared or whatever, it's going to take off on you. And I think that one of the dangers in life is when we don't acknowledge that, when we think, oh, I'm a more logical person than I am an emotional person. I think that's a lie. I think I'll just use the word, everyone is an emotional person. It's just there's those that really recognize and have worked on training the elephant, and then there's those that don't realize how that elephant is actually taking them where the elephant wants to go. And so, again, I think particularly Americans like to think that we're very stoic and we are unemotional and that, we make logical decisions, and we think that. But the truth of the matter is that almost all of us make our decisions based off of our emotions. And we certainly see that when elections roll around.
Absolutely.
One of the greatest motivators out there is the fear of loss. And if you can make people afraid and make them feel like they may lose something, and all you have to do is look at any campaign, and the motivator in most campaigns, no matter the party, is
scarcity.
If you don't vote for me, bad things are going to happen. And in some cases that's true, which makes it that much harder.
Right.
But that's what politics plays off of, particularly, is the fear of loss, because it's one of the most powerful motivators. People don't want to lose things. Even when they could gain more, they will tend to protect what they already have. Even when there's a chance of getting a lot more, they'll go ahead and protect what they already have. And so to this question of how can we be less emotional, I think the first part of it is being aware that you are an emotional person. Where is fear playing into your decision-making process? Where is joy playing into your decision-making process? How are the different emotions making you do different things or inspiring you in those directions? And I think being aware of that is very important, and not to say, "Oh, no, I don't do that."
I think it's also important to distinguish again between belief and faith. Belief is what you've figured out and you've decided to, plant your feet on, and faith is about the things that you don't know. So, the funny thing is, we talk about stronger faith. What is a stronger faith? It almost means, your commitment to the possibilities behind what you don't know versus all the things that you know. If you have a commitment to belief, that's about what you know.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if when we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar, it's more about what he believed based on what he saw versus what he didn't know.
There you go. That puts a different spin on it. Yeah. Well, see, there you go. Hey, speaking of Ken just bringing up elephants, and we're quickly running out of time here, but did you know that elephants like to hide in cherry trees?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, they use camouflage. They paint their toenails red.
Oh.
I mean, have you ever seen an elephant in a cherry tree?
I mean, I wouldn't know. I
It
guess.
works pretty good, doesn't it? There you go. Okay. So sorry, dad joke there. It's one of my all-time favorites. I mean, Ken went elephant. I didn't have a choice. It's in my contract. It's in the fine print, but it's there. One of my favorite things that came in from the chat this week was from Anonymously, who said, humility and worship go hand in hand, I think. The great controversy in this battle is all about worship, pure and raw worship. Even the tiniest bit needs to have the authenticity that comes from humility. I think Jesus coming down right there and then in the fire is one of the first instances in Jesus' character. Here's right. Here we go. Do you think Jesus had the memory of being in the fire when he came again as a human? Come on, that is the best question ever. I'm like, when
he read the book of Daniel, which we know he did because he actually references Daniel.
That's the fun part about it.
So, yeah, when he references Daniel, do you think, I remember that?
I think he did. I'm just going to go on record as saying I think he did, and I think he smiles a little bit when he does it and then moves on like, okay, that was fun. That was cool. I remember that. Those guys.
It is an interesting thing to not just wonder about that, but does Jesus remember handing the 10 Commandments, the law, on Mount Sinai to Moses? Does he remember sharing that? Anyway, yeah, lots of interesting.
And then Sue ZQ, I love it. Sue,
Nice.
capital Z, capital Q, best, currently probably our best name in the chat. It asked, just kind of went over about it's a kind of a raw deal, suffering for Jesus, and we've already talked about that. But at the end, she said, it strengthens your firm foundation by little strength by strength, stone upon stone of that foundation, leading up to the glorious day of Christ Jesus. He who has begun a good work in you will complete it. Even so, come, Lord Jesus. So, Susie Q, I like the ending of that way. Finishing on a high note, so to speak, it was great. And then The other one I think I'll leave one for you guys to consider for yourself as we leave. Like we've teased, now that you're here, and we'll tease one for you guys to think about till next week. But Stanley, I had a comment. I'm sure there were other people like, I'll just bow down physically, but I'm not really worshiping, and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But the three were not having any of that. And then he asked also, where was Daniel? So we already covered that. And then Rod might have the question of the week. I wonder what all the three Babylonian guys' friends thought of them for making such an unpopular scene in the midst of that political storm. And there was something about potlucks being awkward afterwards for a couple of months, passing the manna, something like that. I don't know, Stanley. And finally, Nashville Tim said if 3 from the Jewish nation didn't bow down, that means the other Jews at this event, potentially hundreds or 1,000, did not bow down. What do you think was the dynamic Sabbath at potlucks after this event?
You mean that they did bow down?
That they did,
right?
Yeah. So they were the things to... things to think of. Obviously, there's no answers necessarily for those, but I think it was probably a little awkward.
And I do think that was is one of the things the writer of Daniel was kind of pointing out, that there were other Jewish people there that did choose, and that only 3 stayed. And look at how God protected them and rewarded them for their courage.
Yeah. So here's the one we're going to leave with. This was Tito. Tito, man, you got.
Are we not going to do Nate's?
Oh, you. See, this is why I tell you guys early, because these are on the phone. They didn't make it into the. Oh man. Okay, we can crush this. No problem. All right. Nate had a question by email. He said, "Hi, Whole Life Podcast team. I'm not trying to erode confidence in SDA end time prophecy, but this is a piece of my personal awakening and journey. I don't have an answer that I'm at peace with, so I appreciate your thoughts. And here's the question: Adventist eschatological."
Eschatological.
It's not coming out today. Theology is built around the interpretation of Daniel and Revelation being focused on only Western, European-USA, Caucasian government religion interactions. How does global biblical worldviews of equality of all people, regardless of ethnicity or race, impact the SDA interpretations of end-time prophecies? How can we be so adamant that Africa, South Africa, and Asia have no significance to the end-time prophecies when these wonderful human beings make up the majority of the population? While it's uncomfortable to say, the traditional Adventist views feels a little racist in light of our current reality, an understanding of a broader picture of our world that was not present in the late 1800s. Now that I've opened a can of worms, I welcome any insights.
Thanks, Nate. We're going to send that over to Melanie.
Oh, see, you came back, and, you came back.
Do you want to touch on it, or you want me to jump on it?
I think you should do this one, Ken.
All right. So, Nate, you've asked a question that I've actually thought about and I don't have a good answer for, because it is an interesting thing. And one of the fascinating things about the Bible is it really does follow a very small thread through history. The Jewish people, the Israelites, very small nation in a very small area of the globe. And so for me, it's not that hard to say that. Let me see if I can say this the way I want to say it the right way. It's just an interesting thing that God, I think, interacts with our whole globe. And the story of redemption seems to flow through a linear, or not a linear, but through a group of people over time that this story goes through. I'm not convinced that other parts of the world don't have a bigger role than what we have maybe traditionally seen. And particularly as more time goes by between when Seventh-day Adventist Church was founded and some of our beliefs there, we certainly are a larger world church than we were in the late 1800s. And so the Seventh-day Adventist Church does, however, has taken on a belief that the United States plays a pivotal role in prophetic history and will play a pivotal role. And that's not, I think it's worth kind of realizing that at the time that the Seventh-day Adventist Church was being formed, that was a pretty audacious claim to make, because we kind of are pre-World War II audience that has kind of taken the United States as a world superpower for granted. The U.S. remember, they were just coming out of a civil war, not necessarily a world superpower.
Right, yeah.
Great Britain was really at that point was the major controlling superpower, and Seventh-day Adventist prophecy said, no, the United States is going to play this pivotal role in prophetic history. So for me, as I look at that, I think we need to be careful not to make God the God of a certain group of people that are exclusive. God is the God of this world and invites all into relationship with God. And God also does seem to pick pivotal people to make his purposes happen, whether that's Babylon or whether that comes to Rome later on, whether it comes to Europe, and whether it comes to the United States. And so I don't know, Nate, that's like the end-all, be-all of answers, but I think it's worth pondering, and I think we do need to be careful that we don't allow our biases to flavor our viewpoint of other places in the world that are just as much loved by God as maybe the place that we live. We generally, as a rule, tend to make the world revolve around where we sit, and I think it's important for us to remember that there is a big world out there that God loves.
Does God love Brazil?
Hopefully.
Lucas, you need to be a little bit more sure about that.
He just said hopefully.
Lucas, like, I live in the United States now. I'm
I'm all good.
I don't care.
Oh man,
I'm joking.
That's funny. Oh, we had one more from the text line. So this is anonymous. I don't know who it is. Question for Pastor Ken. Can our mind be a god? We question everything and say, that doesn't make sense to me, and my mind says otherwise. I know better. Don't tell me to pray about it alone. I need to do things to help make it happen. But can our mind be a god?
Yeah. I mean, anything that we worship that isn't the true God can be a god, and there's a lot of us who worship our intelligence, worship our self-reliance. So, yeah.
I know this question wasn't for me, but I just have to jump in.
Yeah.
Looking at the biblical text, God is quoted as saying, "Come now, let us reason together."
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's any issue with asking questions or reasoning with God. You've got a whole history of a lot of really key figures in the biblical text who question God. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know that necessarily means that you are worshiping your own intellect. Yeah. I think it can just mean that you're engaging in a mutual relationship with someone and trying to work things out.
Absolutely. I appreciate that added context because I agree.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So here's something from Tito that I'm going to leave with you guys, and then we're going to do just one or two quick announcements. Tito said, here's something. Are we bowing down without even knowing? Is an idol anything that takes our eyes off God? Because if that's the case, it's funny that we have to look down to be on our phones. It just, Tito, that was a good one. When I was reading through those this morning at 5 a.m., I started laughing, and I think I probably woke my wife up with that one. So sorry, honey, I didn't mean to that. But you're not going to hear it because you listen to the podcast anyway. So I guess I'll have to remind myself when I get home to apologize. Okay, barn party, chili.
Bring chili. Bring desserts. Bring desserts and chili. A lot of chili. And
you know what the other part is, and you'll hear a bunch more this week. We'll have lots of social media posts going out this week, different things. So be paying attention to that. But also, you know what? The happiest people at Barn Party, you know what they bring? After the chili and the desserts? They bring a chair.
Bringing a chair is a really smart move.
You get your little space off to the side, and if it gets crowded, I think last year in order to fit everyone in for line dancing, we had to move a few chairs over to the side into the grassy areas, but not a big deal. Take yours with it. If you're not participating, sit down. You'll be good. But bring a chair, bring a friend. And be prepared to just have a good time. I'm super excited this year.
And I'm looking at the weather right now. And right now, the weather is telling me that we're going to have partly sunny skies, high of 84 that day, low of 71. So perfect weather.
Yeah.
Supposed to, even it says the Friday weather is supposed to be just cloudy.
Nice.
So we're supposed to have some rain on Wednesday and Thursday. So I'm thinking we're going to be really well set. I was a little bit worried because I saw that there was a tropical storm potentially down in the Gulf. And anytime that happens, you're like, oh, please don't let it come our way. But it looks like it is not coming our way. So,
but Saturday is the lowest rain % chance of any of the next 8 days.
So come on
20%,
out.
we're
Don't
good.
just make your plans. We want to please invite your neighbors, invite your friends, coworkers. Everybody invite them to come on out. It is such a good time, and they'll thank you. They'll have a good time, and it's just going to be a good time together. So
My
be
niece,
there.
who is in town for doing her clinicals for PT, her and her PT group are coming, so I'm excited to have her here for the first time.
Making some extra chili then.
That's
right? There you go.
Yeah, we're gonna bring some extra chili to make sure we got.
I used to hope that I was going to win the award, but after 2 devastating losses, I'm just bringing enough chili for people to eat. It's not award winning, but it'll feed you.
Ken, I think you still need to bring your vest.
I thought I was. I thought I was, and I have been humbled by this church. So
I realize that my best and the best are often two different things.
yeah, there we go.
So
Well said.
I'm just throwing that out there. Anyway, yeah. Definitely barn party. So next week, the biggest thing to look for as well is parking will be different. Check out social media. We will show you exactly where you can and where you can't, and there'll be signs and there'll be nice people curating that.
Can I just tell you that the 2 best places to park, in my opinion?
Give it to us.
You can park across Orange in the Advent Health parking garages there,
Or the lot
The
at the
lot.
Cancer Center,
Those are
yep.
excellent places to park. And you know where I park on Sabbath?
Oh, yes, I do. You park at the Innovation Tower.
Innovation Tower. It is about 2 or 3 block walk, and I've really gotten to like it because I park there because I know that parking can be a little bit tough, and but yeah, it's a nice walk, and I like it because it gives me a couple minutes just to
Get ready.
walk it off or get ready as I'm walking in, and
Melanie and Randy and Lucas are on the other side of those doors. I need 3 blocks before I walk in.
Well, if that were the case, I'd probably park maybe
Wendy's.
down by Orlando City Stadium, right?
Just leave my
so,
car in a Popka.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just walk from Altamont. No, but Innovation Tower usually has plenty of parking,
That's
and
true.
easy walk, and nice thing I like about parking there is that you don't have to cross Orange.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And, if you see somebody you don't know, say hello and welcome at minimum.
Yeah.
We're going to have hopefully a ton of people. Lucas and I have been over at the Vita and the Ivies inviting all of our friends, about 500 units worth of our friends.
My.
Come on over and enjoy Barn Party. So that's why the extra chili this year.
I'm pretty sure they'll all show up too.
Well, they've had 3 or 4 digital notices, and they've got another one coming at least yet this week.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping that they show up and have a good time.
We're going to turn the volume up loud enough that they're going to have to show up because
That's
it's
right.
you might as well come out.
Yeah, we'll talk to.
We'll be the Royal. What is it? The not the Royal Caribbean. What is the other?
Oh
one?
yeah, the Mardi Gras.
Whatever the Mardi
is that?
Gras thing is.
We'll start early and often.
It's kind of a cruise.
Yeah, kind of a cruise. Dominion next week, and we've had the plan, the dream, the fire,
The tree.
the tree. Oh, the tree.
The tree.
Forgot about the tree. Yeah, the tree. Well, you don't want to miss the tree. That would have been third one. That would have been the tree. Anyway, never mind. That's
What will come after that? The hand.
Oh yeah, and what's Belshazzar? Belshazzar.
Yep.
That's right. Okay, cool. I couldn't get eschatology out, but I guess whatever. I practiced beforehand too. I went over that at least twice and it still didn't come out. All right, guys, barn party, chili. Dominion next week. You're gonna have to walk a little bit. So if you show up next week in your Nikes, no one's gonna say anything at church. You got to walk a little bit. Maybe the uncomfortable shoes. Good week to leave those home.
But you do get extra points for boots.
Yeah.
It is barn party.
It is. And if you come dressed down a little bit and you want to help at 1:00, start throwing stuff around and just getting everything everything. The final pieces, I like to say, with Leah Bingham and the team, and just it's a fun time to get together and get to know people, and just make sure everything is set and ready for our guests, because the community will be here before you know it at 4. It's quick.
It's a good thing.
Come on down. Thanks, guys, for listening. Have a great week.